Coach Greg, in today's video, you're fatter than you think, and we're going to see exactly why. We're going to teach you how to self-assess your body fat. All too often, people are guessing what their body fat percentage are when they have no freaking clue what they are. And so unless you've had an MRI scan or been asked by Coach Greg to give you his laser eye vision test, you have no idea what body fat percentage you really are. But Mike Israetel has done his best to try and describe to the world exactly what percentage body you have based on certain characteristics. And so let's go over the video and find out.
How to roughly tell your body fat, or if you're creepy like that, somebody else's body fat without any monitoring or skin fold calipers or tape measures or DEXA scans.
And so unless you have Coach Greg's laser eye vision, very difficult to know what body fat percentage you really are. But you can, of course, get estimations. And the holy grail of body fat, as in the best test you could ever had, is the MRI scan. It's actually more accurate than Coach Greg's laser eye, but it's the only one. In second place, many people think it's the DEXA scan, but this is not true. People think it's the DEXA scan, but the DEXA scan's been shown to be off by 15% very often. I've seen it time and time again. It often overestimates or underestimates, and you can easily fool this by drinking more water, carbs, and so on, or being dehydrated. You could literally in one day confuse the test to make it look like you gain 10 or even 20 pounds of muscle in one single day. And so is it actually accurate? I don't think so. I've done this in countless videos, but people, they just don't get it. They think just because it's the holy grail of body fat that it's actually accurate, but it is not.
Nothing beats, technically, the MRI, but after that, nothing beats the DEXA.
Personally, I think that the hydrostatic body fat testing or underwater weighing to be more accurate, at least in people who can comfortably excel out all their air. In comparison, I've seen the DEXA scan way overestimate body fat and way underestimate body fat. Case in point, Will Tennyson said he was just over 9% body fat. Will said in his video, anyone that sees this is going to say, if he's 9%, I must be negative 9%. And so it isn't in fact accurate. We also saw Brian Shaw, who had lost 24 pounds of muscle in a matter of weeks, but it wasn't accurate.
Like very rarely, in some really contest conditioning circumstances, the DEXA can be a little bit illusory and the eyeball is better, but almost never is that the case.
And so Mike Israetel admits sometimes the eyeball is better than body fat testing, and he must be referring to, for example, if it's Coach Greg giving his body fat assessment, because I'm most certainly more accurate at determining body fat percentage for the most part than the DEXA scan. Remember, it's just a number. If Will Tennyson is 9.3% or 11.3%, does it really matter? I don't think so.
30% plus. We will not go higher than this.
And so Mike Israetel starts at 30% plus. He says he doesn't want to go higher than that. Well, here's the reality. A ton of people have way above 30% body fat. For the most part, and I've done this with thousands of people, they estimate their body fat to be in the low 30s when it's often in the 40s and or 50s. People have a hard time admitting just how fat they actually are. When you're 300 pounds and 5'9", you're probably not 32% body fat. You're probably closer to 50% body fat. But people, they don't want to know this. They don't want to understand that. People feel bad, and so no matter how fat they are, they'll often estimate themselves as being 5 and up to 20% lower than they actually are. And so bottom right, we see a man that says 40% body fat. That man clearly has 50% body fat or more. Very far from being healthy, morbidly obese. This man has over 100 pounds of fat to lose. Hey, I'm just telling you what you need to hear. I'm not trying to make fun of him. I'm just trying to keep it real. In comparison, the man with 35% body fat, it is in fact possible that he's that low, but very likely closer to 40%. We don't know. He's not showing his legs. How can we accurately determine someone's body fat percentage if we're only seeing 1/4 of their body? People store their body fats differently. Mike stated this at the start of the video. And so if he has really fat legs, fat back, he's going to have a higher body fat. But if he has lean, shredded legs and a big belly, then his body fat is going to be very low. And so the first thing you need to do when you're assessing your body fat is not just look down at your stomach. You have to look at your stomach, your back, your legs from the front and from behind. All 4 quadrants, top, bottom, left to right, back and forth, everywhere. Next, and this should clear up my point. Remember when I said if you don't have abs, you're probably fat? Well, I was talking about bodybuilders, but look at this man with 30% body fat. I can see a 2-pack going on. He has some form of visible abs that are showing. He has 30% body fat, which is not only fat, it's obese. And I can see some abs. And remember, this is not with amazing lighting. He doesn't have a special tan. He's not pumped and flexing. And so if this guy had his hands over his head, blew out his hair, and flexed, I would see a 4-pack. 30% body fat. And so if you don't see any abs whatsoever, for the most part, if you're a bodybuilder, then yeah, you're fat. And what's fat? Anything above 25% body fat. If you're over 25% body fat as a man, sorry, you're fat. I don't make the rules. And just because you're fat doesn't mean you're less worthy, doesn't mean you're a horrible human being. If you're under 5'9" as a man, you're short. I'm a 5'6" manlet. And so it's just a term. It's just the categorization. If I say someone's obese, doesn't mean I'm calling them ugly. I'm using a medical term. If I say you have cancer, if I say you're tall, if you're short, if you have a tumor, I'm not trying to make fun of you. I'm calling you what you are. And so a guy with 30% body fat, he's a Caucasian man who's obese. Does that mean I'm putting him down? Does that mean I'm trying to call him ugly? Of course not. And notice the guy with 25% body fat. You can clearly see more body fat in his abdominals than the guy with 30% body fat. And so you can't just judge someone's body fat based on the body fat they have in one certain area.
25 to 30%, they're going to have some overhang, but their arms are being weirdly lean, and other people store their fat more around their whole body.
And so here's the thing. The leaner you get, the more areas you're going to see that are leaner than others. If you compare someone with 30% body fat to 25% body fat, one guy might have more fat in their stomach, but the other guy will have less fat on their arms. And so one thing you need to stop doing is just looking at the stomach. What about the guy's arms? Does he have a bicep vein? If you have a bicep vein and a belly, you're still clearly lean.
You can tell a distinct separation because your waist is now a little bit narrower in your lower and upper back, especially if you're jacked enough for your lats to flare out.
And so you really need to consider, as you get leaner, you can see the various muscles on your body. When you're overweight and or obese, you just look like a big solid mass. Doesn't mean you don't have a lot of muscle. You might look like a strongman competitor, powerlifter, or even a massive bouncer. But if you can't see any of those individual muscles, then you're clearly overweight. You're clearly obese. But as you get leaner, keep dropping down a few percentage points, you're going to start seeing more visible definition amongst each of the muscles. You'll start seeing the shape of your chest, the shape of the delts, the definition between the deltoid and the biceps and the triceps. In the back, you'll see where the trapezius is. And you'll see as they're working out in the gym, you can see the muscles move. You'll see each individual muscle as you continue to get leaner. And so you can see here, 20% body fat, you see an incredible difference between 30% body fat. You can see the stomach's a lot flatter. You may not see visible abs as they're standing there, but if they were to flex their stomach, you most certainly would see some form of ab development. But what about the arms? You can see an indentation of the biceps where the delt is. There's less body fat being stored between the bicep and the delt, and so you see distinguished muscle groups throughout the body.
At 15 to 20% fat for males, you might start to see a semblance of shape to your midsection, perhaps a few ab-like structures.
And so as you get into the 15 to 20% body fat range, it starts to get exciting. You can start seeing visible differences within the muscle. When you flex the tricep, you can see various heads. There's more than just one. Before that looked like one large muscle, but now you can see the detail between each muscle head.
Now here's where the fun starts to happen. 10 to 15% fat. In most cases, somewhere in that range, most people will have visible abs, that is to say a six-pack.
And between 10 and 15%, it's a massive difference. You go from having some kind of abdominal development to clearly seeing a six-pack. Huge difference. When I said you don't have abs, you're fat, I was talking about if you can't see any abs under the best lighting, even while flexing, you're probably fat. And remember, it's not everyone. I'm trying to do averages. For the most part, perhaps 98% of people at that body fat range, men, can see some abs. At 10 to 15%, almost everyone is going to have clearly defined abdominals, and I mean while flexing. If you're just standing up, sticking your stomach out, you're not going to see as many abs as if you're flexing harder than last time. Clearly a very marked difference. And so please remember, people who show the lowest body fat percentage, they know how to show off their bodies. They know how to make themselves look leaner. They perhaps get a pump, glaze up the skin, have a tan, downlighting, and when they flex, they look incredible.
Most bodybuilders won't mass up to higher than 15% fat because bodybuilders like to check their physiques to see how their improvements are coming along in the off season.
And so Mike Isertel, as I do not suggest that bodybuilders go above 15% body fat. And one of the reasons is at this body fat percentage, you can see all the muscles. And so imagine you bulk to 25% body fat. You're bigger, you have more size, but you can't see what you're working on. When you're a bodybuilder, your body is like your canvas. And if you can't see what you're painting, well, then what's the point? And so much easier to keep your body fat a little bit lower, 15% body fat, which to me is perfectly healthy. I've stated this in hundreds of videos. 15% body fat is where it should be. Remember, I'm talking about for men. For women, it's usually about 6 to 9% higher. And so at this 10 to 15% body body fat range. You can see all the muscles, you have definition, you look good, you feel good, and so a lot healthier than trying to maintain single-digit body fat, of which at this time you can see everything. It's getting ridiculous. There's a huge, major difference between somebody at, for example, 10% body fat and 5% body fat. It's literally half. But if you go from 50% body fat to 45% body fat, you've only dropped 5%, but it's only 10% of the total fat that you have. And so it's much less notable. And so when you drop 1 percentage point from 10 to 9, 9 to 8, and so on, it makes an incredible difference. But when you're fat, obese, and you drop 1%, you may not even notice it.
For many people, not all, some of the muscle parts are going to become visible. Like if you flex your quad properly, you'll have 3 visible surface quads.
And so at 10 to 15% body fat, when you flex your quads, you're going to see each individual muscle. You're going to see the separation, but you perhaps will not see the cross striations. When you're below 10% body fat, muscles, they start looking different. You can almost see through the skin. It starts to become ridiculous, especially as you approach 5% body fat. When you're at 5%, everything's visible. It doesn't make sense. Your veins have veins. Everything looks crazy.
It's like you're looking at the strength of a division of a military that's 100 people. If you chop off 5 people at a time, 100 people is almost the same strength as 95 people. 90 people can still put up a good fight. If you got 15 guys and you lose 5 of them, 10 guys is really different from 15 as far as operational capability.
And so great analogy in terms of explaining to people, if you only had 10 people at battle in a war and you got down to 5, you've lost half your troops. But if you had 100 and you went down to 95, you might not even notice it.
At this point, 5 to 10%, your face really starts to get lean for most people. And it's getting leaner the whole time, but kind of in a way that people can tell.
And so that's another thing to discuss is the face. When you're below 10% body fat, you look very lean, unless of course you're abusing anabolic steroids and you're holding a lot of water and you're looking puffy. But for the most part, if you're natural, your face is going to look completely different. And below 5% body fat, you literally look like you're dying. When people look at your face, you're thinking, this ain't good. I don't want to look like that. And so although your body might look incredible, your face, it's looking a little scary. You might in fact want to eat more. It's not healthy to be 5% body fat. I can think of a few sports where it might be, perhaps in cycling at the Tour de France or in marathon running. It helps to be that lean because it's a power to weight ratio. But for the most part, in most sports, for example, football, basketball, hockey, and so on, most athletes are closer to 10 to 15% body fat. You were thinking, no, they're all shredded. They're all single digits. Not even close. And so for the most part, 8 to 12% body fat, that is elite level body fat for anyone. No matter what sport you're in, unless it's Tour de France cycling or running marathons, if you're 8 to 12% body fat, you are a prime shredded athlete, gifted beyond reason. Most people can't maintain 8 to 12% body fat even when they're an athlete. Very, very lean. Remember, I'm not natural. I'm on HRT. And so although I'm in that 8 to 9% body fat range, I'm also a cyclist on HRT. And so no wonder I can maintain single digit body fat. But I do not encourage any of you guys out there to try to maintain single digit body fat. You have no idea how difficult it really is. The insomnia you can get, the irritability, the brain fog, the hunger, the lack of energy, it's simply not worth it. And if you do in fact have a lower testosterone level from dieting too hard, of course you can eat more. But if you want to try supplements, G-Test or 3-Test, highly recommended. It can increase testosterone by 200 to 400 nanograms per deciliter. And remember, this is perfectly legal. It's not banned. It's not in clomiphene. It's not banned by WADA. You can actually use this in drug-tested sporting competition, of which you can use all of my supplements. This includes Ecti Builder with various Ecti steroids, as well as GO2 Max with the main ingredient being NMN, which has been shown in studies to increase endurance, cardiovascular performance, make you a better butter burner.
Here's where the insanity begins, sub 5%. First of all, you're riddled with veins. When you are pumped or warm, your veins have veins.
And so what he means by veins having veins is literally you'll see the bicep vein going down, but you'll see veins coming across on the side of it. That is very lean. When you have veins on veins, it is showing just how lean you are.
Not something like where like a typical girl will be like, oh my God, like Brad Pitt's so lean, like in Fight Club, he looks good, ha ha ha. If you see someone who's a 4% body fat training at your gym and you're that girl, you're not going to be like, oh my God, you're so lean.
Exactly. When you see someone at 5% body fat, it's no longer attractive. It's simply something to see. It's not like, oh wow, Chris Bumstead, 4% body fat, Mr. Olympia. That's so attractive. It's not. It's a freak show. It's like, wow, I can't believe a human body looks like this. And so when I went to the gym at 5% body fat, I'd look in the mirror as I'm doing a set. I'd be like, I can't believe a human being actually looks like this, let alone me. I'm literally shocking my own self thinking, how do I look like this?
I'm 5. The striations when they flex are nonsense. But even when just walking across the stage or walking across the gym and they're moving their arms, you can see their tricep striations come and go.
Exactly. Sub 5% body fat, there's striations everywhere. Their glutes are striated, there's striated in their triceps, biceps, chest. It doesn't make sense. They're just standing there. You can see muscles popping and moving everywhere. They're not even trying to show you the striations. They're just going for a walk, and you can't believe what is happening. It's shocking. You'll see the calf muscle, striations everywhere. Doesn't make sense. It's mind-blowing. And so there you have it. You have a better idea of what body fat percentage you are. If you're in the 10% or less category, you don't need to diet. You could in fact benefit from a lean bulk. If you're in the 20% plus category, I would suggest you go on a mini cut. Perhaps you try to get down to a healthy body fat percentage, which for most people, 15%. I know for some they don't have the greatest genetics, and so 20% makes more sense. For some people, they're lucky, fortunate genetics, they can maintain 10% body fat. That is the range for most people that I would recommend, 10 to 20%. Of course, there are exceptions, people who are doing strongman, powerlifting, and so on. You may benefit from being perhaps 25 or 30% body fat, but remember, it's not healthy to get to 30% body fat, but you got to do what you got to do. And to the opposite extent, it's not healthy to be at 5% body fat. It's not a competition. The lower the body fat, the better. Unless you're a cyclist, marathon runner, perhaps a bodybuilder, of course, leaner is going to perhaps make you better, but it's not always the case. And so please be careful. It's not healthier to be 5% than 10, and so please don't strive for 5% body fat. And so like the video if you liked it. Did you like this video? Did you learn something? If you did, please give me a like, leave a comment. Interested in any of the supplements? For example, the Seco protein bars, they taste absolutely ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. How can it be so soft and taste so delicious? This is my favorite flavor, caramel toffee crunch, the one I most strongly recommend. Highly recommend you get this one and use my code Greg, saves you 10%. And of course, I've got my cookbooks and my Circle Diet book, training books, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Got all the different things you need. Please head over to my website, and of course, we even have a clothing line. Head over right now, code Greg 10% off, and until next time, I am out.